Hello and welcome back to the latest episode of UVCE Chronicles, an initiative of the UVCE Graduates Association. I am Prajwal K P from second year CSE and I will be the host for this podcast. I would like to begin this show by mentioning a wonderful quote, and it goes like this. Science doesn't care by and large what the answers are. It's only interested in getting the answer right. And journalism should be very much that way. By quoting this famous quote by Scott Pelley, I would like to welcome the guest for today's podcast, Spoorthy Raman, a freelance science journalist from the batch of 2009 Computer Science and Engineering branch. Our audience would like to hear an introduction from you yourself. Will you please go ahead and tell us more about yourself?
Yeah, thanks, Prajwal. Thanks for having me today. And I think you began the whole episode with a very wonderful quote, and that kind of underlies what I do and what most science journalists in the world do. So, to introduce myself, I'm a science journalist. I'm based in Toronto, Canada at the moment. Before I went freelance, which was in April 2021, I was the managing editor for a science news portal called Research Matters, where we used to cover pretty much all the science breakthroughs and science happenings from India. I worked for Research Matters for about 5 years. I initially joined a proto Research Matters where we hadn't really founded Research Matters at that point in time as a writer, as a science writer. And once we did put Research Matters in place, I was the managing editor and had been since then until recently. So that's been, a summary of where I stand today. And during this time at Research Matters, I've had the immense opportunity as well as privilege of meeting some really dignified scientists, academicians, and also philosophers of science. I've been representing my organization as well as myself and my thoughts in various different fora. Have been privileged enough to win a few awards, international awards. What's important was also that this journey has kind of given me a voice in the broader sense of science and science communication and public understanding of science. So that's pretty much what I've been doing. But yeah, we will get to what I was before this avatar of mine.
That was very great to hear about you. Being a managing director at Research Matters is not a small thing, and even bagging many international awards is such an amazing thing to have. And could you please share about how has your journey been, from doing an engineering in UVCE to being a science journalist today? How was your whole journey?
Yeah, so it's a bit unconventional, I would say, because as engineers, I think me getting into engineering was in itself not my first choice. I wanted to desperately be a doctor. And things didn't go the way I wanted it to. So I ended up choosing UVCE. And at that point in time, I think it was true for a lot of us where either medicine or engineering was kind of the choice presented to us. And much of other basic sciences was not something that was portrayed enough or was communicated about enough. One of those many people in the country at that point in time who had just two choices. So when my first choice did not work, I thought, okay, fine. I'll take this up. And then I joined UVCE in 2005, graduated out of UVCE, as you mentioned, in 2009. With bachelor's in computer science and engineering. And at that point, UVC, I think even it still does even today, where we have good number of placement opportunities for students. So I was no exception, had got placed in a couple of companies. But then there was always this feeling of not having done enough. So I chose to do my master's. I went to IIIT Bangalore, the International Institute of Information Technology, Bangalore, to do my master's. Graduated out of IIIT in 2011 with a master's in databases and information systems. At that point in time, I do remember very well the whole, big data, the revolution behind that, machine learning and all that was just kind of taking shape. I had also done this course on Coursera wasn't there, so it was Stanford University, Andrew Ng, who was a big name and who is still a big name in big data, and machine learning. So it was just like this initial start of this whole revolution that we are seeing today, which is so commonplace. So it was exciting. I also had the opportunity of having a fellowship from Infosys during my master's. So I went to the Infosys Set Labs, got exposed to the research environment per se in a technical area, because as engineers, we are mostly doing applied sciences. There isn't so much of basic research. So working with Set Labs for 6 months during my master's internship kind of, showed me some glimpse of what happens in the corporate culture. And then at the end of my master's, I got placed at Cisco Systems in Bangalore. So I had the opportunity of working for Cisco for about 3 years, from 2011 to 4 years, yeah. So 2011 to 2015. During this time, I was working with Cisco IT. So Cisco has different branches, and since I had my master's in IT, I was working with Cisco IT. It was a good run there as well. I had the opportunity to kind of not only know what Cisco does in India, but also what it does in the US. I had the opportunity to visit the headquarters twice during my time there, and got to know, what is the complete corporate organization of that scale, because Cisco is one of, if not the biggest, it's one of the biggest product companies that you see around in Bangalore at the moment, I suppose. So yeah, so that gave a good glimpse of how corporate things work. So, and then there was a point where I was like, I thought, this probably isn't for me, because I started to realize some of, the boundaries, which is hard to transcend and move beyond. And I always found writing very exciting. I used to be, working as editors for different student magazines. Also at UVCE, there used to be the student magazine called something with P. I'm trying hard to recollect the name, but it was around when Venugopal sir was the head of the Department of Computer Science. So I had worked on that for about 2 to 3 years, during various stages there. And I also had a love for languages. So with UVCE, just across the road, we have Central College, a beautiful campus. I always love to hang out there. And just opposite, Central College, there is this Department of Foreign Language Studies. So I had the opportunity to study German for about 2 years there, and then had a fellowship to go to Germany for a month. And I'm definitely very, thankful for UVCE at that point in time to have made this accommodation in my schedule, where I could skip college for a month, go and pursue my German studies, and then come back and take it up from there. So, the management and the, teachers and professors out there supported me during that time. And all these in bits and pieces started to come together, to kind of help me write a little more, think a little critically and all that. So that I would see was my seed to my journey into writing. It could be anything, but then I just realized my love for writing, love for languages, love for reading and stuff like that. So yeah, from there, also on a personal side, I got married in 2015. I moved to South Africa. And South Africa is a place where the visa and other things don't really work out the way we would like. So I was at home, and I had a good work experience, and I was also on a sabbatical. So Cisco was also generous, and they had given me the choice of working from there, being on a sabbatical, and then seeing how things work out and all that. So I did take that time. I figured out what I wanted to do, and I realized, writing about science, because I loved science anyway, was something I wanted to do. So I picked it up from there. So there was this initiative at IISc called the Indian Institute of Science, and it was called the Science Media Center at IISc, where they would write small one-page press release talking about some paper published out of IISc. So I just joined that initiative as a writer, and this was run by a company or a organization called Gubi Labs. And then we thought, okay, why should we limit ourselves to IISc? We founded Research Matters, as I put it, and then in 2016, a couple of us came together to be on the editorial side of Research Matters, and since then I had handled the role of the managing editor, working with a lot of editors we hired over time, working with about 50 plus writers who were contributing for Research Matters. I myself individually got an opportunity to do a lot of science writing, do a lot of science reporting, talking about breakthrough science that is coming out of India, because our focus was specifically Indian institutes. And then I also got a lot of opportunities to interview different people in science. Like I've had the opportunity to interview Nobel laureates. I've had the opportunity to interact with a few opportunity to interact and interview people like one of the most celebrated scientists in India. And and then of course the groundwork, people who do the groundwork, right? Like every other scientist who is in their research labs doing whatever they do. The overarching aim of all this was for me to communicate what happens in the four walls of these labs, because public don't often get to hear what it is. And like you mentioned in the introduction, it is important for the public to know what's happening, because we are paying for it. It is taxpayers' money going to all these organizations, including UVCE for that matter, and it is our prerogative to tell the public what is happening. And that's my been a motivating drive for me to kind of pursue this. Did that for 5 years, and here we are. And since I moved my base from Bangalore all the way to Canada, I've also kind of expanded who I write for, the institutes that I write for, and I thought freelancing was the next step, so to say. So yes, that's what I've been doing. So it's a long story, but it's a nice story, I thought.
Oh yeah, being a doctor was your choice, but I'm very happy that you are a science journalist today. And moreover, you are working on something you love. That's the most important thing in your life.
Yeah, absolutely.
So many certifications in Coursera, so many of working places. I think it demands a great amount of dedication and interest towards learning. All I could say is that was quite a journey, and it really is.
Thank you.
And moving next, what are you currently working on? Would you like to share some of the experiences which are very interesting? We would be very curious to know about that.
Sure. 5 years is a long time in terms of accumulating experiences, I'm sure. And definitely, like you just said, I don't know how much of dedication, but there is definitely a lot of curiosity that drives my work. So any small thing, like from a basic post-it note, there's a lot of science behind it. There's a lot of science behind what really gets your glue to really stick onto surfaces, and how that can revolutionize something very big, right? So and if you look at the chemistry of the glue, there is a lot of things about what different catalysts that goes in these reactions to get you the glue the way you want it, and how those post-it notes, if you have observed, behave very differently when you flip it or when you peel it vertically or horizontally. So all these are small things that are driven by curiosity to understand them. And if you or for any journalist or a writer, it's definitely a big motive behind what we do. In right now, I'm kind of working on two books. One of them is something that I've already finished, completing my part of the work. So it's under publication at the moment. So this is basically for kids. It's an illustrative book talking about what India has achieved so far when it comes to the space missions and where we want to go. It was thought that kids would be interested in knowing, and many books that is on the shelf today are very focused on NASA and the European Science Agency and things like that. But in India, the communication that we have with what India has been doing is not as much as it should be. So this book tries to address that in some sense. Another book that I'm writing is basically co-authoring with another well-known scientist from India who is working with CERN. And this book is basically chronicling journeys of different scientists who are working in India and doing really pioneering research. So I don't want to delve into a lot of what that book is, but this is the gist of it. So these two books are kind of taking a lot of my time at the moment. But apart from this, of course, I'm on the lookout for stories, and I periodically write for Deccan Herald, which is a publication, obviously everybody knows about it, published in Bangalore, and I have a good relationship with the editor there, and I keep writing about stories that are related to the environment, to the dynamics between science and society, and why it is important for the society to appreciate science and for science to appreciate society, because both of them, in my opinion, need to work with each other and not against each other. And it also not for each other. They have to work with each other. So I'm basically highlighting some of those stories there. And recently I've also published my, a dream publication called Science Magazine published in the US, but it's a very well-read magazine. So I had a story out there as well in the month of March. My first freelance contribution, so to say. So so keeping myself busy with these things at the moment, and interesting experiences, quite a few. One, as I said, I have had the experience to talk to a few Nobel laureates. Not that I regard them any special than others, but it's just an opportunity to kind of know where their journey has come from and what they do and things like that. And I've also had the opportunity to visit the Rashtrapati Bhavan and kind of see the big edifice of our democracy quite closely because of my work, because during one of my of the many projects that I've been a part of, one of that was to highlight Indian science and Indian scientists during an event that the Nobel Prize organization conducts. And during that time, we were putting up an exhibition at the Rashtrapati Bhavan, and I had the opportunity to kind of visit the building, roam in the corridors, and probably have a chance to kind of, to see what the president of the country does, maybe. And that is a place in the Rashtrapati Bhavan where not a lot of people can go. So I've had that kind of experiences. And interestingly, what I believe is an experience that is something that I wouldn't have got being in the engineering, ivory tower is to know how difficult it is to do in science when your resources and your infrastructure is very constrained. Because in India, in many institutes, it is a problem. I remember even in UVCE, for example, I don't know how things have come far now, but during our time, it used to be so hard to do experiments in the laboratories. We wouldn't have ICs, we wouldn't have, the necessary transistors or wires, for all you know, right? So we had to run up to SP Road. I still remember we go to SP Road, get all the electronics that we needed for different experiments, and then come back and do that in the lab. And I hope it's changed, but I'm not surprised if it isn't. So these are resource-starved constraints that we all work with. And the good thing with engineering is after 4 years, you definitely have a job at hand. You move to a better state of life in some sense. But with academia, with pure science research, that's not necessarily true. There are a lot of people who undergo a lot of hardships even when they are doing their PhD, even after post PhD period. It's hard to get jobs despite you achieving the highest degrees ever possible. And it also gives you or shows you the perspective of how different people from diverse backgrounds, diverse social and economic backgrounds come together into academia, and how each of them fare in academia. For us, we think mostly that this is a very level playing field, but it's not. And these are subtle differences that I got to know once I came out of the ivory tower that the engineering degree kind of placed me in. So these are interesting experiences I think will stick on to me for life, whether I do science journalism or something else.
Oh, yeah. I wish you all the best for your new book, which you are presently working on, and the many more books to come. And I'm pretty sure that the kids would be very interested in which you are working presently, that illustration one. Uh, it is very clear and as simple as that. Curiosity drives us. Anything which is curiosity driven will never gets bored. And then one more thing to add on, and what you said, with limited resources and infrastructure, achieving big is an amazing thing.
And that needs to be highlighted as well, because that is what serves as motivation for a few people, I suppose. And also kind of gives a perspective of what people can do if there is means to do it, or if they have the motivation to do it and the struggle to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. And not many gets an easy chance to visit Rashtrapati Bhavan as well. So you have had very nice and beautiful experiences so far. I wish it continues in your coming days as well.
Thank you so much.
Coming to the last part of the podcast, what are the suggestions and tips do you have for people who want to explore the field of science journalism? Actually, what is a good place for them to start?
Yeah, so in the broader context, definitely science journalism is something that India requires at the moment. In fact, the world requires at the moment. Some countries have had a mature, environment where they have nurtured science journalism for a long time. So those countries could probably manage a little better when it comes to communicating science, communicating different aspects of science, etc. In countries like India, where this field is not as well established, journalism of course is quite established, but communicating science and science journalism perspective, from that perspective, there is a lot of opportunities out there. So I think if any of you have a flair for writing and have curiosity in your mind, it doesn't matter what degree you have, or whether you come here from a master's and a lot of work experience, or if you've just doing your studies, you can still start it off. So when you have that curiosity, and if you can tell a story, it could be any story. It could be a story of the science, it could be a story of the scientist behind it, or it could be a story of a beneficiary of that science. So if you're able to spot those stories and tell them to an audience, there is always an audience to listen and raise up their ears and kind of read it or listen to it or whatever. So the first place I would say is read as much as you can. There are some really good publications internationally as well as nationally. For example, in India, right now you have Research Matters. I'm definitely going to be an ambassador there, although I don't work there anymore. Then you have outlets like the Print Science, the Wire Science, Deccan Herald Science, and I think Indian Express may have a few, I'm not really sure. So you have some science sections really well covered in some media, not all of them, unfortunately, but some media houses and mainstream media do have very good science sections. So you can start from there. Most of it is free, so you can, read from there. And if you are able to have the means to read, definitely international publications like the New York Times Science, Nat Geo Science, Scientific American, or New Scientist, a bunch of them. The Guardian is free, and the Guardian has a very good science section as well. So keep an eye. And of course, I'm just quoting examples from the West, but of course there are a lot of such initiatives from the East as well. South China Morning Post is one, for example, does cover a lot of science as well. So we have seen with the pandemic what happens when people don't really appreciate or understand science. There's a lot of scope for misinformation. There's a lot of scope for believing something so blindly without any scientific rigor to it, or some of the quote-unquote snake oil cures that were propagated during the pandemic. People did take them, and then they had more trouble. So we've seen that quite evidently. And this is not a problem just with India. A lot of other countries across the world have also gone through this. And then there is, of course, vaccine skepticism, climate change denial, and all that are like, offshoots of what happens when the public and science don't get along together. So I would say read and understand the context and the broader need, and the canvas for painting your story is quite huge. So you may want to just pick up where you want to start. Some people start with writing. Some people get into podcasting if they're very happy to do it and they have a flair and the means to do it. Some people start off with visual journalism, which again is with all this TikTok and YouTube and Instagram and things like that, a lot of people are trying to bring stories through the visual medium. It could be photographs, it could be videos, etc. So you can pick your medium as well. But all of that will have to start with, what is the story that you want to tell and how you want to tell it. And once you have identified those, there are small courses if you want to, do it. There are a few online. There are a few that, even I conduct, or not on a personal level, but in association with a few things. So you can just follow like social media to get some inputs around this as to where the courses are happening. One of the organizations that does conduct is NCBS in Bangalore. And then there is CIREO, which is a private organization which does this. And a lot of universities have taken it upon themselves to train their students in science communication and science writing. So I'm not sure if that is penetrated enough into Bangalore University or UVCE, but there are universities that do it. So there are also courses that universities offer with science writing at the moment. Last semester, I was teaching at IISc Mohali about this. So there are, good waves of change, I would say, because when I started, I didn't even know this was even a career option. I mean, nobody told me, and I didn't see many science journalists at all. So it's a good field. But I do want to tell people about one thing, that while it shows you, it definitely satisfies your curiosity if you are a curious being, because there are 100 different things to write about, 100 different things to know, 100 different people to talk to. It gives you different perspectives and all that. That's all great. But considering many of the aspirations of, engineers is to get into this top level IT companies, or get this whatever high bracket salaries and all that, science journalism doesn't pay you so much. It's not a corporate job. It's not something that will put a lot of money into your pocket. This is a very, very lousy paying job. The reason we are trying to change that, we are trying to be open about it. And of course, nobody pays us to write bashing up something or praising something. So this is just all a part of work. But while that is true, we also want to kind of make sure that people are paid fairly for their work. So that's something that we are trying to bring a voice to. But that said, do not expect to have as much as what corporate jobs pay. But that's a part of the work. But for me, being here for so long has been very, very rewarding. And that's one reason I haven't really gone back into programming, coding, or the corporate world. So hopefully we'll stay here. Let's see.
Finally, I could conclude that read a lot, know how the things work. If you are curious enough and if you love writing, then science journalism is your cup of tea. It was so clear and was very well said. Love what you do and choose what you love. It's the most important key for being successful in any of the fields.
Absolutely.
To keep it short, the session was so informative and was very interesting. Thank you very much for being here and for spending your valuable time for us. It was a great pleasure having you here. We'll surely try to inculcate most of the values which you have shared to us through your experiences. And finally, I would thank all the audience out there listening to this podcast. Stay tuned to UVC Chronicles for more and more inspiring stories to come. By saying this, I'm signing off here. Thank you.